This is AV Week for August 5th, 2011. Bring out your dead.
Ready.
AV Week.
Performing scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AV Week. AV Week. It is time for AV Week, your weekly roundup of all the AV news and commentary. With us today is Johnny Mota. Johnny is from Business Automation from Northern California. It's a home automation company. Johnny, good morning.
Good morning.
And also with us is Matt Scott. Matt is from Omega Audio Video out of London, Ontario. It's afternoon where you are, Matt, correct?
It is. Good afternoon to you guys.
Good afternoon to you. Also with me in studio is Michael Drainer. Michael is from Tech Electronics from St. Louis, Missouri. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello.
And my name is Tim. I will be your moderator for the day. Gentlemen, the first story up is GovComm 2011. And if my math is correct, I believe this is the first GovComm. According to Infocom's website, simply stated, GovComm 2011 is your number one source for evaluating new products, services, obtaining AV-specific knowledge and skills through educational courses, learning directly from manufacturers through product-specific training, and networking with peers. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounded an awful lot like Infocom 2011.
Yeah, I would agree. It probably is. The biggest thing that would be a plus for me in this type of conferences, I personally don't work in the government realm too much, but it hits me kind of like the difference between going to Infocom for all things, general AV and going to NAB for, pro video stuff and broadcast stuff. You can get some of that stuff at Infocom, but if you want the specialized, full bore stuff, you need to go to NAB. Kind of the same as, going to CEDIA for more residential stuff than, what you can find at Infocom, even though you can find a lot of that stuff at Infocom.
Michael, you're an integrator. Do you have any reason to go to GovComm? Should you go to GovComm? They're in the St. Louis area. They're at Scott Air Force Base, one of the largest Air Force bases that the government has. Large contingency there, lots of AV going on there. Should you go, or should you take maybe some of your clients there?
I don't find it real relevant to what we're doing day in and day out. We've got our direct contacts with the military contractors that we work with, the military entities, other government entities in the St. Louis market. We get our information dominantly from Infocom. I don't see GovComm as something that's relevant to what I'm doing day in and day out. Now, from a end user standpoint, I think there's a lot of decisions that are made in Washington, and coming from that perspective, I think it brings a lot of value to those decision makers that would not normally attend an industry trade show that's focused at the integrators and manufacturers. So this is one that definitely caters more to the end user, in my opinion.
So you're saying this is more of a government version of EduComm?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Johnny, I know you don't do much business with the government end of things, but can you see benefits? Because, as Matt said, this is kind of the government version of CEDIA or NAB. Is there a benefit for someone like an integrator to, let's say, traipse over to Washington, D.C. and check out GovComm?
For me personally, I don't know right away that if this, say this year, it's the first one, if I would go to it or if I'm going to go to it. It's not like Matt was saying that it sounds like I could just go to Infocom and get that same information plus more. And at the same time, it almost seems that GovComm is very specific niche amongst this group of AV such and automation, to the point where if you were in commercial specifically for government, that's what you would be going to. And it just seems that I might just end up going to Infocom over GovComm itself and get some of the same, if not all the same information.
Some of it for me, and I definitely see a benefit here for the government guys, because what you have is, and I like EduComm a lot, so what you have is it's centric, it's in D.C., it's at the Walter Washington Convention Center in Washington, D.C., so you have some big players. I think maybe what they might be missing, because it's called GovComm, that's probably why they're holding it in D.C., However, how many installations, what percentage of government installations are in D.C. compared to the rest of the country? Like I mentioned, we're in St. Louis taping this. Scott Air Force Base is one of the biggest Air Force bases that the government has on U.S. soil, in the continental U.S. There's this. There's the ones out in Denver. There's the ones out in California, in Utah, in Nevada. There are other installations that the government has. So D.C. isn't necessarily where the decision makers are. Well,
and it's not just the military. You got to realize that there's other branches of government that AV is heavily integrated to. I mean, here in St. Louis, we've got the U.S. National Defense Mapping Agency. We have the National Records Center, and you find those types of places throughout the United States. So, at a very high level, GovComm plays to the end user, but I understand what you're saying, Tim, that those decision makers are spread throughout the continental United States. And how does a show like GovComm really cater to their needs?
Yeah.
So,
because they could just easily just go to Infocom, or have it a little more central located, like not St. Louis, but necessarily Chicago, Denver,
Vegas.
Vegas is nice.
Okay, real quick. Vote of the group. Who prefers Vegas over Orlando for Infocom?
I do. Matt?
I haven't been to the Infocom in Vegas yet. I just hit Orlando this year. But I have been to a bunch of shows in Vegas for it. It's a toss-up for me. They're both hot.
says the man from Canada, yes.
Yes, says the man from Canada.
In Vegas.
I'm sorry, Johnny, what?
Sorry about that. I said I was unaware that there was an Infocom in Vegas. Because
it was years ago, wasn't it?
Oh, did they? So they just travel around, right?
Well, what happened was a few years ago, my very first Infocom was 2007. That was in Anaheim. And that was at the Anaheim Convention Center. I think it's called Orange County, actually, which is ironic because the one in Orlando is also called Orange County. After that, my understanding was they made some kind of they're scheduled for the next, I don't know how many years, and I really don't, to go back and forth between Orlando and Vegas. So in 2007, it was in Anaheim. In 2008, then it would have been Vegas. 2009 was back to Orlando. 2010 was Vegas. This year was Orlando, and next year's back in Vegas. So I really don't know how many years they're ping-ponging back and forth.
All right, well, I'll just plan on seeing the two of you in Vegas next year.
Yeah, the big plus for me of it being in Vegas is, honestly, they have more restaurants.
Yes.
And that's what it's all about for me.
I'm with you.
And stuff to do. Getting around Orlando is something.
Definitely restaurants in Vegas is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
my wife calls me the self-proclaimed
everyone knows what happens in Vegas stays on the internet.
Exactly. And Facebook and Twitter and yeah. The one comment I would make, just back to the location thing, is, these trade shows usually move around unless they are, just in Vegas or something. There's never one perfect location that works for everybody. This year Infocom being in Orlando was great for me. I could just hop a flight down the East Coast. For somebody like Johnny, who's got to cross, the entire country, it's not going to be as easy. If they put it, if it's back in Anaheim, that's going to be a whole lot harder for me, much easier for Johnny. You guys being in St. Louis are kind of, in the middle there. But I don't think it ever completely, it'll never be good for everyone.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, you talk to the vendors, and they're, One Tron is in Jersey, one Tron is in Anaheim, and so 1 year one Tron is happy, the next year the other one's happy. So,
well, and I think that's my point with the whole GovComm thing is, you host it in D.C. because that's where the majority of the federal government lives, but you do, like Tim said, there is a substantial number of people that are going to be coming from the West Coast, the middle of the nation, and actually from around the world, really. So I'll be curious to see what the turnout's like at GovComm 2011 and be able to recap that at a later date.
All right, actually, speaking of Vegas, one of the stories that we had was, it kind of caught me, and it was something that happened on Twitter, I guess, 2 or 3 days ago. This was about Clare Controls, CLARE Controls. This is a new control company, or a relatively new control company that has. The company's not relatively new, but this product is. It is called the Clare Home Controller, and it's a Mac-based home controller. This is something that I've kind of seen over the last couple of years with home automation, and Johnny, this is kind of your area. not only them, but also people like Control 4 and other people that are encroaching into the big control guys area. Is this an issue for Crestron, Extron, AMX? Is this an area where they're somewhat vulnerable to these smaller, more nimble guys? Or are they just one or two companies that are making something that's kind of cool? They'll be one-offs, and then they'll fade into oblivion, or they'll be bought up by one of them.
I see almost like a two-part answer with that. Is that like example with Control 4 is like when they first came out, there was like a big push for them because they were far cheaper than say AMX or Crestron, because they were the big boys in the industry, costing much more. But at the same time, those companies are far more robust in ways that of automation. At the same time, they're also, those guys are have put out smaller systems, like say example Prodigy for Crestron, to kind of like not directly compete, but in their own way. I feel that's what they're doing, is putting out a product that is supposed to be comparable to that smaller end system for a fraction of the price. But then I also see like other companies like URC with their new total home control system that may be kind of getting into that same field as we see towards the end of the year. They're going to be releasing a lot of product that may kind of combat with that, but I don't really see them overtaking like the bigger projects. I don't think I'll ever see a big project on a high end scale. Is like kind of what I specialize in is high end residential. I don't ever see myself or many people, if any, kind of speccing a big project to do something with those smaller end systems. I have seen some of those smaller end companies or lower cost systems do high end residential systems, but at the same time, I hear about some people using brand X lower end scale systems and hating it and ripping it out to use some of the bigger boys because they've seen how it works and is more effective.
The reason I bring up Vegas is because last year during the Infocom show, one of the biggest ads in the Infocom daily publication that they put out during the show was from Control 4, and the fact that they did the entire installation at Aria, which was the newest, fanciest, latest, greatest hotel and casino in Vegas. So these guys are kind of able to do larger, fancier systems. I'm just wondering if maybe Crestron is either they're not focusing on residential, or they're giving it to these guys, or they just kind of lost focus and they're doing the DM, and they're doing the whole building automation stuff. So that's kind of my question with that. Michael, do you think that the Extrons and even Aurora, they're losing ground to these guys, or are these guys just kind of doing their thing and it's room for everybody?
I think my limited exposure to the resi market is keep that in mind when you're hearing my response here, but I don't know that the resi market's really been a primary thing for the big system control manufacturers. It's more of a icing on the cake type thing. If they get the residential, it's a few extra dollars. It helps with revenues, but I think their big bucks really come from the larger AV integration services. Thoughts on that, Matt?
I would have to agree. They definitely are grabbing, much larger contracts when they're working with, corporate situations and definitely the more commercial applications. That being said, in the resi market, Crestron does have especially in the high end, Crestron and AMX, they really own that market. There are guys, like Control 4, like all these other companies that are, moving into that space. And yes, Control 4 did do the huge install in Vegas, which I would love to see how those quotes compared if they, really address that as strongly from a quoting side, with both AMX, Crestron, Savant, Control 4, some of the bigger players. And I'd really love to see how that went down, which I'm sure we never will. No. But, it's something where these smaller companies that have come up, I know we do a lot of URC stuff. We also do a lot of Crestron stuff. It's something where you have a lot of clients who on the lower end, just really have a hard time getting into, some of the Crestron products. And they want some of that control, but they want it much more on a, affordable basis. And that's where a lot of these smaller companies will be able to play and should be able to play very, very successfully. I know, with a lot of the Control 4 stuff that we quote against, it's stuff that sometimes we can hit it with Crestron, sometimes we can beat it with Crestron, which is wonderful. And then there's times where we can bring in, say, a URC piece and compete with the Control 4 piece perfectly, hit every same feature that they have, and get it out the door and be done. It's something where I really don't ever see, some of these smaller companies. I don't ever see URC beating, Control 4, or I'm sorry, beating Control 4, and definitely not beating, Crestron at their own game. That being said, it is just different markets. It's like any other industry. There are people who, can only go down so far as a Mercedes, and there's people who can never go above, a Ford. And there's no problem with either one of those. It's different sections and segments of the market.
So what's your opinion on the I'm going to say I hate to classify them as residential control system manufacturers, but that's really where we're seeing them, the Claire and the Savants and people like that, as they start to encroach more into the professional market. Because you said something very interesting to me and just a moment ago, and that was they can't afford the Crestron or AMX in the residential, so we see them in the high-end residential. But what about that professional user, that commercial user, who is trying to cut the corners, and I use that term very loosely because it's still a quality product. But
it is called value engineering.
There you go. Yeah, taking the
Yes.
VE solution into the commercial environment. How do we feel that these other manufacturers are going to play in that world coming down the road?
Well, a lot of them are playing that hand very, very strongly, or attempting to. Again, what it comes down to in the commercial market is, I know we had a customer just this past week that we were working on a situation for, and they had bought the essentially the entry level product and expected all this extra stuff to come with it. And we had to explain to them, well, you're a company of 5 people, so no, you're not able to, or you're not able to justify all these other things. So when you're looking at the the commercial market and guys who want to cut corners, there's definitely and again, we shouldn't probably use the term cut corners, but be
value
very
engineering.
There's automation that they can get to do that, but again, there's going to be limitations on how far that can go. There's some systems where they can put it in and they can control a couple of their boardrooms and do that just fine with a more entry level system. But if you start talking a much larger corporation or a much larger building, that's where you're going to run into those limitations when, even if they do want to cut corners and be more cost effective, there's a limit to, you can't get everything for the price of nothing. It's something where, again, unfortunately, the markets at this point, there are just essentially hard limits on what you can do with each product and each product line, if that makes sense.
No, it's insightful. Yeah,
It does. And let me ask you guys this: is when you're competing with Crestron versus, let's say, Control 4, is it a matter of the hardware doesn't match up, so the Crestron hardware is more expensive, or is it the fact that when you get into those systems, you have to pay a programmer to program the Crestron, because someone who has gone to the classes, has become Crestron certified, that is going to increase the cost over, let's say, a Control 4 system, which is primarily just HTML. Is that what is driving up the cost and making Crestron a little less competitive in the residential market?
In the projects we see and that we have competed on and worked against, Control 4 quotes and stuff like that. Again, it really does come down to what they're being quoted and what they're being offered. We quoted on a system a couple months ago that was a light commercial, it was a golf course system, and the Control 4 system that they quoted on, we were able to beat, and actually beat fairly well. I think we beat it by 10, 15 points with a Crestron a Crestron Adagio system that actually did more than what their Control 4 quoted system would do. And again, there are areas where it's more expensive. There are areas where it's cheaper. It's hard to make a blanket statement on that, just because there are so, it really just comes down to what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to do. There are some areas where Control4 will always just be cheaper than Crestron at this point, just because of, if you're adding these 3-4 pieces, the only way to get that in a Crestron system is to add 7, or something like that. So it's really on a case-by-case basis. But yes, with Crestron, there is a lot more work involved in becoming Crestron certified and becoming a Crestron programmer and what you can do out of the box. Whereas with a lot of the Control4 stuff, I don't want to say that they'll, give anybody a Control4 dealership, but it has kind of seemed that way the last little bit, that there's, security companies everywhere popping up, slapping a Control4 sticker on their van and saying, hey, we can sell you automation. And, again, for the guys like Johnny and myself who are bigger Crestron people, and Johnny does a lot more of this than even we do, as far as the straight automation stuff. It is something where we put a lot of work into keeping, maintaining, and staying current on all the Crestron stuff, just because they are so big and are so advanced.
Yeah, Johnny, talk to me for a second about home automation and the big players there. I mean, I'm going to assume certain things about home automation. I'm going to assume that Crestron is in that mix and AMX is in that mix. But then you have Control4. You have this new company, that has this new Mac-based system. Who else is there in the residential market that is kind of duking it out for the middle and higher end residential installations?
Could you repeat the last part? You kind of cut out there. You're saying, like, who else is there in the higher automation systems that are out there that are kind of competing at that level?
Yes. Who else is in that market? Who else are the people fighting for the residential dollars?
I'd say as of lately, it would probably be Savant. But, like, a funny thing in that realm is that, like, an example, it kind of goes back to other questions on, like, people kind of competing for lower end systems and who using higher end systems during this economy and why. Another local integrator here in town is working for Apple. Well, some of the high-end people, like the main guy at Apple iPad development, Mr. Jobsniak, if you will, doing a job for them, and he is not using Savant. And at the same time, their new facility that Apple is making is definitely not going to be Savant, from what I'm hearing, which is funny to me, and it makes me think that Apple doesn't even really care about Savant. They kind of like, yeah, we're selling, we're selling our product in your system. Good for us. But at the same time, it doesn't really seem like that they personally are using their own systems.
What are they using, just out of curiosity? But
they seem to be, in the last year or two, I'd say, making a lot of leeway in that higher end system for automation themselves. I just thought it was kind of interesting that those employees of Apple themselves aren't using Savant.
What are they using, Johnny?
Crestron, from what I understand.
I am shocked. No,
I don't believe it.
No, the reason I ask is...
Sorry, that laugh was priceless.
Yes. The reason I ask is because...
So, I mean, even, I would almost say, like, Control4 has taken a big share of the market for a high-end system that we've seen for... saw the article on CE Pro where they were doing I can't remember the number there, but it was a pretty big install where the entire house was Control4, and I'd like to see how it turns out. I know there's a lot of changes in the end there, but I'm kind of curious to see how that one plays out. And then at the same time, it'd be nice to see what they have in comparison to just say AMX or Crestron or another system, to get that and see what price ranges were. I'm probably sure that Control4 is going to be cheaper, and that's how they started, or they decided that anyway, was the cost factor. But at the same time, like I said originally with Control4, not to knock their company, I think they're great, is that I've just heard a lot of people, or local Control4 people, because there's so many in my area, talking about how easy it is to install it, get in, get out, but at the same time, it's buggy. It's just really buggy, and that's like their one complaint is just, it's really cheap to get in and out, it costs less, and people are all about it, except for the fact that it's really buggy for the end user.
The reason I ask is because one of the, for me, surprising thing that's happened in the last couple of years is the emergence of Crestron as a player in the control system. And the reason I say that, yes, they've had the IP link stuff for a while, but 2 years ago at InfoComm, they came out with the touch panels, the graphical user interfaces. And up until that point, all of the Crestron interfaces were these push buttons, and that was one thing that AMX and Aurora and Crestron could always point to Crestron. Now that they have the graphical user interfaces, are they going to be a player in the residential market, or are they just, this is, just another added benefit that Crestron can give somebody, like an education or a house of worship? Anybody?
I personally have never used Crestron, although I do see them a lot in the field. I think it may just be another push to try and to cling, or not cling, but kind of hold on to what they have currently, and maybe even make a bigger push. But I don't know if necessarily that they would be making any more leeway into that higher margins. I just don't see a lot of it out there, although I do see some, just not very much.
Matt, do you see any in either the house of worship or the installations that you do where Crestron is either competing, or maybe you're going against an Crestron system and you're quoting a Savant or a Crestron system?
I don't see.
Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Sorry. We don't see it too often in the residential side. It is there a little bit. Usually when we see it it's brought in by a homeowner who works in the IT field, and they use a lot of Crestron switches in corporate and commercial stuff. So they've grabbed something and brought it home. In the house of worship market, we do see a lot. Granted, I haven't seen much of their straight up automation stuff anymore. We used to see it a lot more, a lot more frequently in the past. But lately, it's just something that hasn't been used as much outside of, we see it all the time for, essentially really their matrices and their switches, but not so much of it being controlled. Most of it being not a dumb switch, but, push button switches, etc. And we've seen a lot of that market share kind of be eroded. And again, this is just from my personal experience. A lot of that market share eroded and picked up by other companies doing other things, whether it be, computer-based switching. And again, most of my experience in this realm is house of worship. So it is, obviously a little bit different. But a lot of it being picked up by either computer-based switching and controls like that, or something in a broadcast or pro video situation where, again, they're just not using Crestron as much.
Here's one thing. I've kind of watched Crestron over the last few years, and I work for a community college in Illinois, outside of St. Louis. We were a huge Crestron house, and this has probably been 5 or 6 years ago. I asked them, I said, do you have any kind of graphical user interface? This was before I knew anything about Crestron or AMX or any other companies, but we were doing a large multi-purpose room. And I said, this would be really cool, except, the powers that be, the decision makers wanted a graphical user interface. And they said, no, if here's some things that we can do. I think it's something that, they have missed the boat maybe for so long that it's going to take some time for them to catch up against Control 4 and AMX and Crestron, if they even can, or if they even want to in the residential market. They may have no desire to be in the residential market, and if not, that's cool. But Michael, you're a big Crestron house. When you do installations, have you ever spec'd an Crestron system, touch panel, or even button, like the little IP link button control user interfaces? Have you ever spec'd one for residential?
No, because, first of all, we don't play in the residential market at all. Yeah, so that's why I'm kind of deferring to Johnny and Matt on the resi stuff. I'm more interested in the residential players coming into the commercial arena. But I can say on the commercial level, we do use the Crestron stuff for small room systems, little doctor's offices, small office spaces where they need basic control. And I could definitely see the product lending itself well to the residential arena, it just doesn't have the sexiness, I think, that a lot of resi people are looking for in control systems.
Which I think is why they came out with the graphical touch panels.
Right.
Next story, guys, and this is something that I think Matt said, are you surprised? PV files lawsuit against Behringer.
No.
Okay. Here's the PV press statement. PV Electronics Corporation, one of the world's largest manufacturers of musical instruments and professional sound equipment, has initiated multiple actions against Behringer for various intellectual property issues, including patent infringement, false marketing, trademark infringement, and unfair competition. Here's the question, guys. This goes beyond the world of AV. For the last few years, the big computer guys, Google and Apple and Microsoft and all of these, have been playing what's in essence been a throwback to Cold War days, gathering up as many patents as possible to protect against mutually assured destruction, kind of like the old, gather as many nukes as you can get. And when I saw this story, I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. The whole patent dispute thing is kind of rearing its head in the world of AV. However, upon closer examination, I find Crestron involved with it, with Savant. I find Vizio and Sony involved in it. So this is just another version of the mutually assured destruction, and these guys getting their collars in an uproar over patent infringement. Is this something that we're going to see more of, or is that this is just PV and Behringer kind of sniping at each other, Matt?
I think it's something we're going to see more of, because as you had stated, these companies have been buying up patents like crazy. It's also something where the market has become so tight, and by tight I mean very, very big and very full and very close, so that you're seeing a lot of these companies going after where in the past they may have kind of let it slide, to use that term loosely. They wouldn't have been as aggressive to kind of deal with this. Now, because there's so much more competition, even though our market is not as huge as some of the other types of markets out there, there's so much more competition that they're trying to protect any leg up they have over the competition as in any way possible. I know we see that a lot with the TV patents and all that stuff that's been going down the last little bit. But we've also seen it for years with, Crestron and Lutron going back and forth over light switches. And, it's just something where I think we're going to see it more. And I think they're probably going to start publicizing it more, because I know with, Behringer and PV, that's something where, a lot of the people who have used Behringer over the years, they know that they're buying essentially some form of a knockoff of some other product. And it just comes in at a lower cost. So it's something where we've kind of known about it in the industry, and it just either hasn't happened as much or hasn't been as well publicized as it is now.
All right, here's the next story. Then we'll move on. The story I sent you was for the Panasonic. Panasonic introduced their new $20,000 turnkey video system. This struck me because over the last 10, 20 years, we have moved from the giant studios, not only in educational institutions, but also in the local TV markets. And now you have things like NewTek has all of their TriCaster stuff. Matter of fact, the guys over at Twit, that's their key piece is a piece of NewTek equipment. Then you have Panasonic with theirs. Have we moved away from the big, massive broadcast installations, and are we now into a more economically friendly production studio, Michael?
I believe so. As a former broadcaster, I spent 6 years in broadcast engineering for a local television group here in St. Louis. And, when we built our facility, it was about a $1.5 million investment for a small 3-camera studio, a full SDI switcher, 2 ME, Grass Valley switcher, big Encore router, and it was a lot of infrastructure and a lot of capital. But with the affordability of HD technology coming down, it's making it much easier for the average consumer to produce high definition content on a budget. And I think, Matt, you can really speak to this in the house of worship market, what you're seeing in churches in their ability to produce high def content.
Oh yeah, this is killer. When I saw this link come across my desk, I somehow missed it when it was first released and saw this and went, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me!" Because even last year alone, we did a couple consulting projects with a couple different churches and looking at some form of this system, and it was a little bit more pricey than it is in the package. But this is, for a lot of the type of churches and ministries that we deal with, this is a great entry-level system that you can do. It gets you into that true, pro HD level, again, not to the farthest extent, but it gets you in the door. Whereas before you were spending that much money just to get into a prosumer level, which, as you and I both know, is not the same. It's something where not only is it a great package and a great price, it is actually good products. This is good stuff. It's something that just makes it so much more attainable to churches and schools and anybody else. But that's what we want to see in the industry is, everything just becomes a little bit more cost effective.
Absolutely. And to put this in perspective, 5 years ago, 20 grand was getting you into an entry level prosumer system, where today like you said, you're doing full high def quality, entry into broadcast quality. And I think that the lines between broadcast, prosumer, and consumer are really that gap is really starting to narrow, and it has been narrowing for quite some time. You can't really say that I have to have that $100,000 Ikegami or Hitachi camera anymore. There are some small cameras that are putting out some amazing pictures these days.
Yeah, it's something where I remember when X Games, to use them as an example, first brought out and started using XL1s and XL2s and then the XL HD cameras for actual broadcast quality stuff back in the day, kind of pre-HD. And I remember watching that and going, this is ridiculous. When was the last time we actually saw something shot on cameras of essentially this low quality and this low cost that actually works and gets you something that you can use? So when that, kind of started the ball rolling, and now just where everything is, it's shocking what you can do with, a $5,000 camera.
No, it is. And one of the stories I sent you guys was the new Twit Cottage, the cameras they're using, and I want to say they bought 30 or 40 of these little handheld. Technically, they're HD. They're 720p.
Well, the whole thing's debatable too. What is HD?
Don't start. Technically, they're HD, but there's like 36 of them, and they cost $2 or $3 grand a piece, and they threw them up all over the studio, which makes it, a little incredibly cost effective to do something very cool like that. I think I remember the first camera that my church ever bought was $20,000. So and that was 20 years ago. So. Finally, guys, this came across my desk this morning, and I don't know if I'm supposed to read this, but, it came across my desk, so what the heck. The Crestron transition from analog to digital, get up to 100% trade-in credit. That's right, I said 100% trade-in credit for all of you wonderful end users. Bring out your PVID, QM, and IM system into the digital age with the Crestron Digital Media. It's quick, easy, and highly profitable. So basically what Crestron is saying is this: bring us your poor, your tired, your huddled mess of analog systems, and we'll give you brand spanking new digital. Johnny, are you going to call all your residential guys and say, hey, throw down, get rid of your VCR, and I'll bring you a Blu-ray player and a brand new digital media box?
Definitely. I got that email this morning, just like you did, I'm sure, and it's definitely one of those bring out your dead moments. I was talking to one of my clients the other day about how he has this huge distributed audio video system, PVids and such, that's completely Crestron, and how very soon that's just going to be a big paperweight. And he looked at me with like the biggest stare of like, you're kidding. I just bought this, X amount of years ago. And I looked at him like, well, technology changes, every so often. And it's not something I did to fool you or whatever. It's just something that's happening. I'm making you aware that in about, say, a year or two, this is going to be obsolete and you're going to have no video content anywhere. And now that I see that, I have a chance to say, hey, remember the other day I was talking about this, and you were like, I don't want to pay for all this stuff. If he has the chance to take out that entire system and have up to 100% just like swapping out, and all I have to do is charge him the labor, I could see him. I mean, you would just be ridiculous, silly not to hop on that train. I mean, a little bit of labor, yeah, I get it, but seriously, if you can just trade a box for a box and a little bit of labor time, why wouldn't you not want to do that versus just having a bunch of equipment in a closet or wherever it may be that does nothing and you spent a buttload on it? I would be upset myself.
Well, absolutely. Or the other option is to just, throw it in a closet or throw it away and buy all brand new. Matt, is this something that not only House of Worship, but your other installations that you could bring to your customers? Because, I get the church market. Believe me, I do. I help our church out, and it's part of the conversation is cost and money and resources. But this is something you could take to them and say, okay, you know what? I get budgets, but here's something that you can do to upgrade your system from the old stuff that you have now and bring you more into a more modern age.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to try and essentially leverage as much as possible, not only to, help us as a company, but also help our customers, because especially, as I'm sure you know, working with churches, a lot of times they're not going to drop, that entire system cost at once. They'll try and essentially almost do a piecemeal and, do a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. So with this type of offer, it's something where hopefully we can go to a lot of our customers and clients like that and say, hey, we can help you upgrade this system right now, get you into essentially, the 21st century, with the latest and greatest stuff. And it will really, cost you pennies on the dollar when we're just talking labor rates. So it's something that, especially in the House of Worship market, I think can be used very, very effectively. And, major, props to Crestron for doing something like this, because it is extremely frustrating for both us as integrators and, our consumers when you buy something and within 2 years it's completely outdated. So, any time that we can help them upgrade and, just better their systems with minimal output for them is obviously better for everybody.
Michael, you do a fair amount of installations in the education market. And just like with the House of Worship, there are budgets, there are issues, and I get that. But is this something that, let's say that 3 or 4 years ago, you did a brand new installation? Technically, that system should still be viable. That system should be still robust and working. Is this something that you can take back to your college or university or K through 12 installation and say, hey, look, I know we just did this, but, here's some digital stuff. It'll work. I swear there's not going to be any changes.
3 or 4 years ago, try 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay.
I mean, we still have a number of clients that, you educate them about digital and the importance of it, but they say, we don't have the budget. Give me VGA. That's all I need right now. Let's move forward. So we do it. It's what the client wants. You educate them and you try to progress them with the technology. So now this kind of changes the game, because we can go back to those systems that we just deployed and say, hey, by the way, we can trade this stuff up now. Yeah. It's not going to look real good, but it's bringing some value to the customer. I'll be interested to see, though, how the other manufacturers follow suit, if they're going to follow suit. I think this is a brilliant marketing ploy by Crestron to get their product into many different client spaces. And I think that the competitive manufacturers are going to be amiss if they don't follow suit with some sort of program that's similar to this.
Okay, here's a stupid question. Who can follow suit? Because who's doing DM or something like DM?
Well, DM is not necessarily, they're not going to be capable of doing digital media, but there's no reason they can't offer upgrade programs from analog to digital systems. I mean, the E's and the A's and the other A's that are out there definitely have the ability to say, hey, bring us your old VGA matrix and we're going to give you an SDI matrix, or we'll give you an HDMI matrix, whatever the case may be. So there are other ways to bring upgradable solutions on a trade-in program like this.
Good point. Gentlemen, I thank you. That is all the time we have today for this week. That's all the time we have for AV Week this week. With us today has been Johhny Mota. He is at JMOTA number 3 on Twitter. Johnny, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything you want to plug or promote?
You could catch me on the inner tubes at blogging for Visas Automation, www.vsys.us/blog, various other blogs, or more importantly at ravepubs.com, part of the Rave blog squad. And yeah, I'll see you there.
All right. Matt Scott is from Omega Audio Video. It is exactly that on Twitter, at Omega Audio Video. Matt, anything you want to plug or promote?
Nothing major to plug. Just, keep putting automation, get rid of all your remotes. Let's do this right, people.
Michael Drainer has also been with us in studio. Michael's from Tech Electronics. That is Michael, Michael Drainer, Drainer, on Twitter. Michael, thank you. And anything you want to plug or promote?
Just keep it going, guys. Have fun.
My name is Tim Albright. It is TD Albright, TDALBRIGHT on Twitter. However, at the conclusion of this, last week's actually, we started something new, and then I called it AVNation.tv, and that's where all of this is going to be hosted and held, and so that has a Twitter handle. That's AVNation TV on Twitter. But also, anybody has any information or ideas or comments or anything, either go to email us, which is tim@timalbright.com, or just go to the AVNation website. It's avnation.tv. Also, if you would like to leave a comment, have a question for any of the commentators we've had so far, I got us a Google voicemail. It is 219-23-AVTV1. 219-23-AVTV1. That's 219-232-8881 if you don't have the alphanumeric on your cell phone or your office phone. Thank you very much, and this has been AV Week.